Welcome to NeuroNoodle's Neurofeedback and Neuropsychology podcast featuring tech legend Jake Gunkelman. He's the man who has read well over 500,000 brain scans, and Dr. Marie Swingle, author of I-Minds. Our goal is to provide information and promote options for better mental health. The NeuroNoodle podcast is supported by listeners and businesses just like you. Jake Gunkelman.
Howdy, howdy. Had to click OK and
how are we doing? How are the West
okay.
Hey, there we go. Life is good.
Everybody's on duty here, you know?
What the hell is going on with Los Angeles, Jay? Jeez Louise.
Well, Santa Ana winds, and since May they've had 0.19 inches of rain. So it was tinder dry.
Yeah.
In fact, that would take the moisture out of tinder if you put tinder in it, you know. And it just takes a spark to get a wildfire going in a circumstance like that. And if you've got 70 to 100 mile an hour winds going from on land to offshore. I don't know if you've ever been in Topanga Canyon.
No.
That it runs to the shore and pops out near Malibu. And a fire ran that canyon. If you were in a car, you couldn't keep ahead of the fire, and the road is littered with burned out cars, and goodness knows, they've had to bulldoze them out of the way in order to get fire trucks through and stuff. You know, it's a natural disaster. It's disproportionate, probably because of how the extended drought and climate change probably driven to some extent. These are all natural processes that are taken to their logical extremes by climate change. The polar vortex. You know, when you were a kid, you grew up in the upper Midwest. You knew weather reports. Did you ever hear about a polar vortex? You know,
cyclone bomb.
Bomb cyclones, and when I was a kid, they didn't even calculate freaking wind chill.
North Dakota. I mean, that's
in Fargo. What the hell, you know? I have actually taken a pot of boiling water outside at -40 and thrown it in the air, a quart of water, and it goes up and disappears.
Yeah.
It's as dry. It's as dry then. If it was fire season, you know, but in the winter there, nothing will burn. You know, it'll take the heat out of the match. You know. So,
what I don't understand, Jay, is you can throw in the climate change and all that stuff, and again, I'm taking everything with a grain of salt because we're getting into a new president coming in, and everybody's still pretty fired up about the politics.
Yeah.
But they were talking for a long time that they got to clean up that dead stuff down there.
The they is the federal government because it's national forest.
Yeah.
And it's the Forest Service and the national they manage that by basically selling off the timber in large swaths. And that's their resource, and that's what they use to harvest it. But it's a good resource in that respect. But their management of it is notoriously poor.
Yeah. What is their issue?
I lived up in the woods. I know this issue.
Yeah.
My home was one of 3 or 4 that made it through a major fire that ran through the Sierras, through gold country. Grizzly Flats, the highest tonnage to come out of the gold country, came out of Grizzly Flats where I had my home. And I had it at the end of a ridge line where it dropped down. So I had a great view, but I cleared 100 feet around the house. I had a gravity-fed fire hydrant in front of the house, and I put a sprinkler system on the roof. So all you had to do is throw a valve from outside the house. My neighbor could do it if I wasn't there.
Yeah.
And all the water pressure would basically go, straight up onto the roof, and the rainbird 50-foot perimeter was soaked around the house. So, the uh, 350 or more homes were burned to the ground. The ranger station was burned. The school was burned. The post office was burned. Grizzly Flats ceased to exist, basically, other than my home. And if you live in the forest, you have to kind of account for these things and design for these things. I built a 3-story house out in the middle of the woods, and who the hell does that? You know, you get
That
solar
guy.
you get solar collection up above tree line, so you have to have a higher story count than you'd normally end up building. And it was designed by an idiot and built by the same fool. So I had 6 foot wide, 8 foot tall arch top windows on the upper floor, and the sun coming through that in the winter went down through a stairwell. The stairwell had 3/4 of an inch of stucco on the surface to gain solar heat, and it had a railing. It went down the stairs through the railing into the kitchen on the far side of the house. Sun, So anyway, it was designed for burning wood. And the wood burning fireplace in the corner had a stone wall around it. And normally that kind of heat will drive you out of a room, but I had a 10-inch duct on the ceiling that drew the heat from that corner up into the attic to a blower system to blow the heat to the rooms upstairs. So that corner, once you lit that stove, an hour and a half or so later, that house was all toasty. And anyway, it was 12 years of construction. I built it myself, and I ended up freaking near dying from the brain tumor in the middle of it all. So, but I finished it. I lived in it for about 3 years,
Yeah.
but the doctors up there couldn't have kept me alive. So
Right.
I
So
had to sell it.
we we have Lisa Cramer going to join us from Colorado, and this is kind of crazy, but she said, "Hey, I got a fire alarm in my building. As soon as we get back in, I'll." Like, what?
Hey, Colorado's had fire issues as well,
Yeah.
and the Pacific Northwest being as dry as it is, they've had fires in Washington State and Oregon, and goodness knows Canada had huge fires and stunk up the entire Midwest,
Yeah.
from the smoke. Remember
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Everybody's choking on the smoke from the fire in Canada. So,
And
yeah.
I mean, do they clean up their forests better than we do, or just different
No.
density of population like LA?
Yeah, if you go to Europe, you can find some manicured that they have foresters that it's a job, and they go through and they harvest trees that are in need of being harvested, and trim and collect wood and stack it, and some wood's available for the public to take. But in Europe, they also have these fires. Portugal, Greece, Italy. They've had drought and droughts followed by major fires.
Yeah.
Tragic. natural disasters. Nobody blames DeSantis for the hurricanes. So, you know,
Dr. Marie Swingle.
Good morning.
How,
hey,
how's Canada doing? We got any fires up there? We got Lisa Cramer. She's in
Yeah.
Colorado. She says, "Hey, I'll be on in a second. I have a fire alarm going off, and as soon as they let me back into the office, we'll come on the show."
Oh my gosh.
This is
Yeah,
crazy.
no, we're doing good because it's cool up here, but summer it's a different issue. But we've sent all of our plane stuff down to you guys, so
Yeah.
yeah, hopefully, wow, this is something else again.
Well, while we're waiting for Lisa, any carryover from last night's Q&A show, Dr. Marie?
Oh boy, I mean, we went around the world and back. Actually, one little thing, Jay, we were talking about the effect on the frontal lobes. Of course, some of your great insights into alcohol in terms of how it affects us differently, meaning it tells the truth of the frontal lobes. And then were we talking about psilocybin or ayahuasca, Pete? Do you remember?
We were talking everything in LSD, and I think I threw in the CIA in the 1960s that there was a
Oh,
lot
well,
of.
that, yeah. Oh, okay, well, that was a whole other one.
Oh,
One topic at a time. Yeah, but oh, geez. I don't know. I was pokey yesterday. So
well, the frontal lobe and alcohol,
yeah,
alcohol will eventually disinhibit you.
bingo, yeah.
But the alcoholic starts out, if you're a low voltage fast classic EEG pattern, that's super common in alcoholism. It's not every alcoholic,
Yeah,
but it's so common when you see it, you basically expect there's either a personal or a family history of alcoholism or addiction.
yeah.
And it's a genetic pattern, gene number 4, and it controls GABA receptors.
Yeah,
And when you have so many receptors that you can't saturate them, you're over aroused.
yeah.
And if you get GABA, and in life you can run into GABA by having a beer. Yeah, and if and what we've seen is a low voltage fast EEG takes between 4 and 6 ounces of alcohol to end up having well-formed posterior alpha.
Yeah.
Okay, if I start with well-formed posterior alpha and the guy next to me has to have 6 shots to get to where I start, don't you think that's a slippery slope for them to be dancing on?
Yeah.
So it's that you can't walk through life titrating the amount of alcohol you're consuming.
Yeah.
Now, some of them get it by switching to GABA receptor targeting with benzos and things like that. But the classical addiction was to alcohol because alcohol is so
Easy.
prominent. The camera's being buffeted by Sky rolling around,
oh,
getting a
we missed
different
that.
sleeping position here. He's now stretched all the way across my lap
Oh,
from the far side of the chair across my lap to the and
yeah.
in a little bit he'll slip down onto the footrest and occupy the entire chair here.
You
So
better hope he doesn't
Well,
dream.
as Sky takes over, I actually remember it wasn't the other drug, shall we say. It was Ozempic we were talking about.
Oh,
And Pete was making a joke that people's wives weren't drinking anymore because they were taking Ozempic or something.
you thought
yeah,
you heard
it it acts on craving,
Yeah.
which is an anterior cingulate issue,
Mhm.
and that can change all sorts of other things.
Yeah. Yeah.
In
Andrew brought
addiction,
up though, Jay.
1/3 of addiction is driven by the anterior cingulate,
Yeah.
not the overarousal of the low voltage fast EEG or anything like that. It's an obsessive compulsive drive, and they happen to be locked onto something that's substance addiction.
Yeah.
Now you can get them clean and sober in a program, they'll swear they'll never touch another drop of anything.
Ha
But
ha.
that cingulate will find internet porn or gambling or symptom substitution is its game. It'll find something
Workaholism.
else. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. And anything that it can lock onto, and it's very creative. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Yeah.
It's ready to go. And
Mhm.
if you fix the cingulate, you get rid of the drive and the addiction goes away and you don't have symptom substitution.
Yeah.
But the alpha theta training at the back of the head is not going to touch the anterior cingulate stuff, which is why Peniston protocols get about 70% success. They
Mhm.
miss the third that end up having the anterior cingulate finding.
Yeah.
Yeah, we showed that in our study on outcomes on addiction of an N of 30, and did the training based on the phenotypes.
Well, they have to put a cancer warning now on alcohol, don't they? Or I saw something.
Yeah. Prop 65. If you've got a cancer risk, you got to label it, and there's there's cancer risk. Geez, probably for everything. Drive up to the pump to fill up with gas. There's a sign on the side of the pump. Walk into a lot of buildings, you'll see a warning, a Prop 65 warning that the building may contain something that might be hazardous to your health. You see warning stickers on pretty much everything. So
What mental health warning would you put on a can of beer? Don't operate heavy machinery.
use as advised.
Yeah. Question is by whom? Yeah.
Yeah.
The it, there's an issue that I don't really have a dog in the fight, so to speak. I haven't had anything to drink for 34 years.
Wow.
And ever since they told me I probably couldn't drink anymore, I tried twice, and it was such a big mistake. I haven't
Yeah.
tried it again.
Okay.
So, I don't drink at
So are
all.
you saying the cure for alcoholism is take out your pituitary?
Well, it would definitely change the amount of reward you would get from having something to drink. It makes you so damn ill.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a drug that they give to alcoholics to try to keep them from drinking.
Yeah.
It can be sometimes court ordered, and anabuse. And anabuse is a kind of a flaky, if it doesn't dissolve well. But at the state hospital, they would try to dissolve it in a cup of water and have them drink it, because if they could stick it in their cheek, they'd spit it out. So, but if you drink, you'll end up having really severe reactions. You can have hypertensive crisis, cause a stroke if you're prone to that. Um, Anyway,
Decent
the
side effect.
yeah, but it was started in Louisiana. The court ordered use of anabuse. Was
Mhm.
started there by Dr. McNichol, and he was famous for the prescriptions of anabuse to people that had
Does that work on the gut or the
drinking
brain
problems.
or both?
Well, it's systemic, and when you drink, the systemic change is a giant inflammatory response. Your blood
Mhm.
pressure shoots up. You get beet red. Your eyes quite often are so bloodshot that you look like you're about to bleed out.
Wow.
And you, I've seen the abuse reaction a few times. I worked at the state hospital for those years, and the my lab was in the alcoholism drug division.
Mhm.
That the first applied psychophysiology laboratory in a state hospital in the U.S. 53 years ago now.
Nice.
So.
Nice. Yeah.
So the fire that's going on in LA, what are we talking PTSD? We're going to teach people
Uh,
how to breathe, but there's no good air. Like, what do you?
Well, for the moment, most of the smoke is just being blown offshore.
If the winds are
Uh,
staying where they get it. Yeah.
Wait till the wind that they're looking for coming
Turns.
from off
Oh,
the ocean onshore. All that smoke can be blown into the valley, and the air quality down there is going to get to be bad air quality, kind of like you expect from LA. You know,
Yeah.
uh, they're you fly over LA and you can see this haze over it. You know, it's not a great air basin.
yeah.
Well, a
But
lot
to
of,
respond to your question, Pete, I think this is going to really, really play with people's notions of safety. One of the things in many, many areas of the first world, unless you live in very specific zones, we walk around so detached from the power of nature. And then you get these major events in urban environments, and yeah, it's completely destabilizing. I'm not saying that some of the fires that, for example, we have up here in Canada are not atrocious, but they do tend to affect smaller towns, where it's not unexpected. The notion of a forest fire
Yeah.
is not foreign. And then I'm going to get my dates wrong, but I forget how many years ago, maybe around 10, we had our first forest fire in a small city. And that was a game changer, just in terms of, people were totally unprepared. People had set up, built houses, no expectations whatsoever that a natural systematic event would get them, so to speak. And
Yeah.
I highly suspect that although California is an earthquake zone, and to a certain extent you're more and more familiar with fires, I don't think anybody ever was expecting such massive, massive natural force in such a highly stabilized, inhabited region. And
Yeah.
I don't think in terms of, how we're raised and how we teach our kids, we're just
Yeah.
totally unprepared. Like,
In a town you don't expect it.
yeah, yeah.
In Oakland in the hills, there was a fire that ran up the hills in Oakland and burned all these multi-million-dollar mansions,
Mhm.
and they all had shrubbery around their homes and nice wood roofs, wood shake roofs, and all of that went up. It was a similar circumstance with the wind, and it just drove the fire right up the hill.
Yeah.
let's stop
And
talking about fire. Well, I think Lisa's going to pop in from
Uh-huh.
Colorado. Hopefully the fire alarm is over. Everybody evacuated. Lisa,
Oh my goodness.
what the hell is going on,
I
Lisa?
don't know. We have one of those clocks that's just a battery. And right when we replaced the battery and hung it on the wall, the fire alarm went off. We're like, that doesn't make sense. But it wasn't our clock. But the whole building was sitting outside and it's snowing here. So
You're in empathy with California.
yeah. Oh gosh, so
Yeah.
awful. Hi Mari, how are you? Hi Jay.
I get
hi,
Yeah. So yeah, a
Lisa
little
Cramer,
crazy.
catch your breath. Now you're in Lakewood, Colorado still?
Yeah, I'm in Colorado this week.
This week. Okay.
Yeah.
And for the
Yeah.
people who don't know, I mean, we're all buds, we hang out, but tell us about the practice that you have here and how long have you known Jay, the whole 9 yards?
Okay. Well, so I started in Illinois. I have a practice outside of Chicago in Lombard, and that is therapy and neurotherapy, like counseling therapy, both. And then at Suisun 2 years ago, the summit, I met Sherry Johansson, who had a practice in Lakewood, Colorado, which is just outside of Denver. And we were chatting, and I was about to try to open in Colorado with one of my therapists, and we didn't even have a space yet. So
Yeah.
Sherry's like, "Oh, no kidding! I'm actually selling my practice." So it started this crazy year of conversation and just kind of amazing needle in the haystack kind of a fit for both of us. So she's still very much available to us, but she's doing a lot of her consulting and mentoring and teaching. But I just saw her yesterday, and so this out here is almost 100% neurofeedback. We offer counseling, but Mostly it's neuro stuff.
Is that the Mind Body Neurotherapy?
So Illinois is Mind Body Neurotherapy, and as of January 1st, this one is Mind Body Neuro Colorado.
Ah, okay.
But it was Gray Matters Neurofeedback.
Okay, got it.
So
Okay.
rebranding is loads of fun, but we're doing that right now.
Well, let's set the record straight. There's people watching all over the world here. Besides for our, political commenting, people like to get some advice on mental health. Where can people find help using the people you influence?
What do you mean, where we're located, or?
Yeah, that's a simpler way of saying it.
Right. Well, so in Colorado, we're at the south end of Lakewood and the north end of Littleton, which is southwest of Denver. Real close, though. I mean, Denver's a big little city, so there's, a half hour any direction near somewhere. And so we're here and have, a staff of a wonderful group, couple BCNs. One's working on her qEEG now. And they're all about it. So it's really fun. They're young and fired up, and they love neurofeedback. It's so fun to work with them.
Nice. We need next gen.
Yeah.
We need next gen.
This is, they're 24, 23, and 28.
Ah, perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's really fun.
Got to harness that energy.
Anyone want to come up to Canada?
I'm not giving them away. No way.
Yeah.
I try to keep them as long as possible. So
Yeah.
We were talking about that on the Q&A last night. It's such a hard thing when people get into this business. Let's just take a therapist that says, you know what, I want to add neurofeedback, and they get stuck between the $200 an hour they can get from the talk therapy versus whatever insurance will pay for the neurofeedback. And yes, there are things that you can do, but the hard part is you have to train all these people. And once you get them trained up, there's always somebody out there to poach them from you, and you got to start all over again. And you're like reinventing the wheel. And I know, Jay, you're going to say co-opetition.
And Lisa, chime in, and pardon the interruption because this is so big. That is our problem here. We train people up, and off they go. So it used to be that we'd have interns and keep the interns, and that was great, but it's a major issue. I don't know about the US, but for us, it's not the insurance. We get the insurance. It's what psychologists can make an assessment. They can make fortunes, and I mean fortunes in assessment versus neurotherapy. Your heart is in it. There's not major money in it, but there's big heart in it. Lisa, how are you grappling with that down there?
So I have gone two different routes, Illinois versus Colorado, let's say. So Illinois, because we do a lot of counseling work, and we do all ages, a lot of our neuro clients come from our therapy clients. Like there's someone we've worked with and they're, getting stuck, or there's med mismanagement or things along those lines. And so then we present, because the counseling clients are insurance based. For I'd say 90% of them. And so then to say, well, we have another option here, but we don't accept insurance for it. And they won't pay the codes if we submit. So that route has been hiring therapists. And I really like that supervision piece and the ones that are coming up. And I don't know who it was I read a long time ago about hiring for therapists. It was a woman, and she said something like, hire someone you want to go have lunch with, like your people kind of a thing. And that has proven out. And when I've strayed away from that, I've ended up in trouble. So
beautiful advice.
And it's simple, right? Really simple. Yeah. So those therapists, but I don't know, most of you might know Dr. Lori Russell Chapin, who passed last spring. She was at Bradley University, which is in Peoria, Illinois, and she headed up a neuropsych, what do you call it? Like a concentration in the master's program. And she made Bradley keep that as one of the concentrations the students could select within their master's. And there's very, very few master's programs that have any neuropsychology at all, or even neuroscience or neurophys, any of that. So I've gotten now 3 therapist from that program. And I had reached out to her and we were in talks of like, how can I funnel, because I have work for them. But, and then she was ill and passed. So that I'm hoping someone will continue her program there because these therapists are so well versed. They're rock stars. So they
It's
come
a
in.
it's a great match. Neuropsychology training gives them a depth of understanding of brain function and anatomical localization and so forth, but it's all assessment. And it's a perfect match with neurofeedback, which is actually intervention. And the few neuropsychologists I've known that have added on neurofeedback end up really blooming their practice because it's not just writing a report and giving somebody a diagnostic impression of some sort, which is a moneymaker. But there's actually less and less of that at this point in the U.S. The DSM has been declared invalid, so the diagnosis doesn't necessarily mean as much, and the insurance companies have started to deny testing to establish a diagnosis because the diagnosis isn't valid anyway. So why should they pay for the testing? Greg Charbonneau added EEG, qEEG into his practice, and that has bloomed. But he finds now that if he has an abnormal EEG, qEEG finding, he can leverage the neurodiagnostic testing that they were previously denying. And he never predicted that. I mean, he thought of it as an interesting add-on, not as a lever to get back to the pay for reports that he used to be doing. Yeah.
He also mentioned to me this past year at Suisun that Oregon and Nevada and another state that I can't think of are covering neurofeedback under therapy codes. And so he actually was unhappy about that because it cuts out anyone who cannot bill those claims for those codes. Like you need to be a licensed mental health practitioner to bill 90837 or 9079, whatever. And so he was like, that cuts out a lot of wonderful practitioners. So he wasn't thrilled with that. Now I'm from the mindset of like, I want insurance to cover this for people. So it's a tangled web. So
yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things that I talk a lot about and, occasionally lock horns with people on is, that's not a bad thing. And I think we need different tiers and different forms of certifications. And I mean, the best example is dentistry, and also medicine. You have the dentist who will do a surgery, who's qualified to do surgery. You have a dentist that's qualified to do examinations. You have dental technicians, you have dental cleaners, you have dental assistants, right? And there are different levels of insurance and different things that people do. There's nothing wrong with that. I think where we get into trouble and why, we bang heads in a good way is when you have a dental hygienist assistant billing for dental surgery, right? So I think we have to smarten up in that regard. But I mean, I love it because it's the beginning. Right?
Hopefully.
Yeah.
The only insurance that I've ever found to be of use was the insurance from Hollywood. They call it the insurance plan. It's Screenwriters Guild, Directors Guild, Actors, Screen Actors Guild. All of the guild people basically, if you're on a list of providers for them, they don't have to go to anybody to go to you. They just see, massage, they can go to that. Neurofeedback, they can go to that. So I had an office in Beverly Hills, and their insurance paid within 2 weeks of being billed, and they never audited anything, ever.
Lovely.
So,
well, you think, why are movies so expensive? Well,
well, if you're going to work your people, 20 hours a day for 6 months straight, you better give them a little bit of help there.
It was a unique circumstance.
Lisa, what was top of mind for you when we connected to have you come on the show? Like, what's been going on out there in Lombard? Is there any progress where parents are letting their kids do an EEG for school to get a baseline, that type of thing?
I do think so. I do think there's some traction. At least, we have, it's really dumb setup, but two offices across the hall from each other because I grew rapidly and I needed the space instead of just getting one bigger one. But so we have these big posters on the walls and they explain what is neurofeedback. And then I also have a company called MBN Sport. And you are part of this, Pete, actually, why this came about, because early on, this is a long time ago when Skip was still on here.
Skip and Laura, yeah, my sister, yeah.
Yeah. So about baseline qEEG for concussion, right? And this conversation we've all heard we've had these a lot. But so MBN Sport was created to do just that. I had children, two college athletes, and we played endless club teams of all sorts of sports. So I have a lot of connections in the Chicago area with coaches or people who run those kind of club sport things. And I agree with you so much about why are we not doing this alongside the sports physical or the school physical? And having a son, and I dare say it, plays football. I know it's bad, it's terrible, but by the way, Jay, congrats on your Bison national champions again. Pretty impressive. So so that piece, we do get some traction, like emails and calls asking, can I get my kid a baseline for the season? We did do, almost half, it was voluntary, so about half of the Valparaiso football team, we did baselines before the season. So it is growing, the awareness of that.
I don't want to get into any HIPAA stuff, but have you had anybody that did get the baseline and then were able to go back and say, something is here, or God forbid, nothing really bad happened that they had to do it, but it is peace of mind to have there.
Right. Not like super alarming things, but there was definitely, I kept track of all those players that we recorded who had prior concussion, knowledge of specific prior concussion. So they were in a separate file.
Yeah.
And that, it teaches you a lot when you see so many of those recordings in a row of what it shows up like. And, and then watching and seeing, I knew that about certain players and then see them get concussed again. You're like, it's an argument against football, but
is it easier, and it's all relative, and I hate using these type of words because I know Jay and Dr. Marie don't like it, but to get somebody involved in the process where it's easier to understand an EEG versus trying to explain neurofeedback and all the different things that it can do and all the alpha waves, beta waves, and all that, I know you're doing both, but which one is quote unquote easier to not sell, but to communicate what's going on with the brain to a parent?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say they're probably equal in my mind. I think of how I present it. The EEG, though, is useful for so many different things when we're talking about maybe ischemia or we're talking about baseline
learning disability,
speed.
maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Processing speed or medication information, so there's all those pieces. My family and friends are sick of me saying, don't put your kid on a med until you get an EEG. So they're tired of that, I'm sure.
Yeah, hold on. You know what? We're not tired of that because who knows what the algorithms are going to trip over. How should they do that? Like with the meds, get the EEG, and I know we've had Martijn Arns, Jay, is he the one that did the study? How should parents do that, Lisa? And then Jay and Dr. Marie, you can follow up.
Well, I mean, most of them don't even know what it is, right? I would say, especially if they have young kids. More and more I hear people ask me what I do, and they're like, oh yeah, my kid did it, but it's not super frequent. And most of these conversations rise because they're coming to me being in the mental health field because their child is struggling, whatever that means. Depression, anxiety is epidemic, right? Or eating disorders, whatever the topic is. And they're saying, we've tried this med. And I said, well, there's a way to know or to get at least more information about what will work for your child. And that's through the EEG. It will at least tell us some things that won't be a good choice, and you can rule them out. I know, and maybe Jay or Mary knows more about this, but there's a lot of psychogenetic testing I keep hearing about also. So they're testing blood for markers that also apparently lead to better information about what medications will work or not. That's out of my wheelhouse.
The genetic testing gives more information about liver metabolism, whether you're a rapid metabolizer or a slow metabolizer of different drugs. So it's not so targeting as it is. It's good advice, but it isn't what they thought it might be when they started to promote genetic testing for med prediction. So, but EEG for med prediction is a very useful approach. Unfortunately, psychiatry doesn't generally use EEG to assist their guidance in med selection. However, for instance, in autism, 60 to 70% of the autism have epileptiform content in the EEG, but no seizure. And if they have a behavioral acting out that's severe, they may be given an antipsychotic if you don't know that they've got discharges. If you know they have discharges, you give them an anti-convulsant. So it changes the class of medication, and an antipsychotic is going to make the discharges worse, not better. So the use of the EEG to guide medication selection is, I think, so underutilized. It's really unfortunate.
I want to jump in here a bit, Jay. I support 50% of what you say, but I think there's probably more than a 50% of abuse of this, and this is hence my just throwing out the 50%. I think there's definitely a place for meds. And the example that you just gave, I think, is perfect in terms of a child that definitely would benefit from medication, could have extreme negative effects if it's the wrong medication, and really, really good results if it's the good medication, or the correct medication. My concern, however, is that, our field is going to be corrupted as an assessment tool for medications. And as opposed to, what we're all trained and what we really believe in, which is giving us information to train the brain in such a way that medications are not required. So I would really like to polarize that in two different camps. I think is extremely important. The other one is, just what Lisa was, the question that Pete asked Lisa in terms of, what do you share with your clients? I very frequently get caught in a situation where, I don't know whether to say my colleagues or my competition are showing all these fancy pictures, and the client has no idea what is being talked about. It's all flash and pan, and certain individuals presenting those pictures actually don't know what they're talking about, and many of those pictures are created off of really incorrectly artifacted or controlled EEG. So when I look at raw EEG or present the pretty pictures, it's just essentially to say I've done it, because that information is for me to be able to work and help the person and the training. So that's kind of an interesting one. So there's certain information that I think is really helpful for the client to know, to be on board in terms of what you're doing and why, to be able to follow the data that this pattern is changing. But I have a major issue with the information that really only the provider needs, and then the misinformation based on I would say data that isn't really data. It's flash and pan advertising. Anybody want to?
So Mari, though, I have a little bit of a push on that, because
okay,
and Sherry definitely is so gifted in this area, but the education of the client, the education of the families, of my friends, of
Oh,
the
Lisa, I'm
people
going to
that come
stop
across
you. We're
neurofeedback.
100% on board. No, I
Yeah.
completely agree with you. Again, I spend with every new client anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes going over the data. No, don't get me wrong. But please continue, but you're not pushing back, we're agreeing.
Right.
So
Okay. I feel like,
Yeah.
I would suggest that medication and neurofeedback are options for treatment that you offer the client as treatment options, because ethically you need to present them with their treatment options.
Yeah.
And medication may provide a short-term immediate relief with neurofeedback done concurrently to provide long-term relief.
Yeah.
This was done in a study by Vince Monastra in a school system. All the kids that had a high theta beta ratio ended up with the doctor diagnosing them so that they could get medication, and they all got methylphenidate. Now, half of them, randomly selected, also got neurofeedback. And 6 months later, the medications were discontinued. The ones who got neurofeedback stayed okay. The others reverted to their ADD ways. So, they can be paired. I mean, my life depends on medication day to day to day. So I have nothing against meds, but you need to be providing your client the options that the EEG predicts as treatment options, as opposed to not showing them. A case, Isabella, the intractable epileptic, who's now graduating and probably going pro in tennis, actually, as well. But her case was one that ended up having an EEG done in a neurofeedback practice. And they didn't share the report that my company generated, which included a discussion about the spike that was in the EEG. They did the neurofeedback. The family moved to Europe. She started to have seizures about the time she started to have her period, and they were intractable. She was having hundreds of seizures a day. They were ready to cut her right temporal lobe out, and the family decided to do neurofeedback instead of brain surgery. And she graduated with honors from Baylor and has been on a 4-year tennis scholarship. So as a full ride scholar playing tennis. And we hope to end up having her pop in as Suisun this year.
Oh, nice.
Nice.
That'd be great.
Well, we do neurofeedback with people, and it's nice to hear back from them, from their perspective. What was the experience? I mean, she went from basket case to success story, but it's not all just the glory at the end. There's the process, and what's your personal process like? And that's, I think, revealing as well. R. Douglas Field's book, The Electric Brain, talked about his neurofeedback session, and he had a running dialogue. He had a low voltage fast EEG. I analyzed his EEG, told him kind of what protocol to do, and Jessica Ure in her office did the training with him. And at first, his just busy mind, buzza, and he writes out this internal running dialogue in the book. And eventually, the last segment of his training, he kind of got it. And the internal dialogue was more of a relaxing and floating and whatnot. But you can read his book. I would advise it. Basically, The Electric Brain. He has a short piece out right now about the early history of EEG, which is historically correct, which is not necessarily easy for some people, because Berger was a Nazi, so, I mean, and there's a lot of people that tried to kind of paper that over, but he actually went to Jenna and found diaries and whatnot. I mean, the journalism that he's done is astounding. But he talks about biofeedback, neurofeedback. He talks about brain-computer interface at the end of the book. From the discovery of EEG and electrical phenomenon in beings, all the way through to the brain-computer interface and AI stuff. So a really a nice job as an author covering extremely technical information in a real readable way.
Lisa, let's talk EEGs again. How Jay's retired. He'll, depending on if there's a free spare hour in his day, he'll help somebody read raw data. Has anything changed in the last few years on reading raw data? Do you farm it out? What's the best way to do that? Because that's such a crucial.
Well, I mean, where do I go with that? I believe in like Santiago Brand was big in shaping my kind of path through this, who I adore, and listening to Jay for years now. And I really do think you have to put your eyes on it yourself. I don't, Sherry, we laugh about whoever does the recording. So if we're doing an EEG, is so far ahead already from watching the recording of processing that data after, because you were watching it as it happened. And so it is curious to me that there's all these companies that farm out, but they're big operations, I think, and for time management, maybe it's necessary. I mean, Jay, you own a group that does that, I think. So there must be enough people that need that service, but we're small, right? We're two small clinics, and we want it to be kind of individualized boutique feel of we're very focused on what each individual needs and wants for outcomes. And so I'm still learning so much in this world. I mean, my qEEG is just minted. So, these guys have years and years on me. I really think it's important to be looking at it. The AI piece, I know you guys talk about this all the time. You just can't catch it. It can't catch everything. It's too unique.
So we can't use the autocorrect yet to get the artifacts out?
Here's an example. And this one I might send in, Jay, for Friday. But I did a recording in Illinois with I have an I-Sync wave. And while I was doing the recording, it was really clean. And I was pleased. Well, I sent it to here to Colorado to one of my staff to look at it because she's learning too. And when we took that ADF file and put it into WinEEG, it looked very different. And that's frustrating because if I look at the I-Medisync brain analysis of it versus what I look at on WinEEG, they don't match, or they match in general, but like there are pieces. I don't know if Jay wants to talk about that at all, but it's hard. It's a tough science.
Yeah. Well, the de-artifacting that's done with I-Sync is using Amica, Advanced Mixture ICA, which is a superior technique, but it requires a supercomputer. And the use of Infomax, which is the ICA form that you can use within WinEEG. Now you can also use fast ICA, but that's not really a good form of ICA. It was an old form. Fast ICA finds each component and takes them out. And Infomax finds components and tries to maximally separate them. So you get maximal independence with the Infomax spatial and temporal patterning. Now, Infomax is not quite as good as Amica, but when it's done well, you can usually match them up awfully closely. Muscle is something that Amica can take out better than anything else. So there are things that are its strength, but system is set up very nicely to take data that's collected from dry sensor, which is not usually the easiest data to handle. Very high impedances inherent because there's no skin prep. As long as you've got some contact, you end up having an adequate recording, and it's received medical clearance as a medical device. So
how close is it compared to the Great Gunkelman? What percentage you think?
I use the same tools, So and when you're reading EEG, you need to be able to learn how to read around artifact as well, because show me an EEG with no artifact, that they don't exist. So yeah, and EEG it has no ground to it. So there's always an argument. If you change the montage, change the filter, it changes the look. So you have to know what you're doing with EEG, otherwise you can ruin it as you think you're cleaning it. The valid criticism of independent component analysis is the person using it getting carried away. Taking one more component, one more component, one more component. Dirk de Ritter had an N of 1,000 subjects that had tinnitus, and they had their EEGs, and he wanted to he wanted to do an AI machine learning thing with it, so he needed to have all the data cleaned. Well, he set his tech busy at it, and after a few days of there's 1,000 studies there. After a few days of doing it, he said, can't you assign another tech, to assist to get through this stack? And he said, yeah, okay, So, and there was a young woman who was a new tech in the lab, and she was doing really good work with recordings and whatnot. And she was assigned, and so they had her clean stuff that he had already cleaned, and checked her cleaning against his cleaning. Her cleaning was so clean that the thalamocortical dysrhythmia, which is the clinical event, was gone. So, oopsie, that little component you took out was the actual meaningful clinical event, and that's all too easy to do.
I'm going to jump in here and just again, really echo this. And I don't know whether it's an issue. I mean, it might be that I'm just too old school, and we have the newbies versus, the middle, and then they are our forefathers and foremothers. But I'm with you, Lisa, that, standing in the room is everything. And sometimes we don't even majorly clean it because I've seen it, right? And I know what to do once I've seen it. But then again, in terms of somebody else working and wielding the data, that doesn't work. And to, exactly what Jay says, you can over clean it. Also, one of the things in terms of, some of the work my father was doing versus, what I was doing, I was just fascinated with outliers and fascinated with artifact. And in fact, I mean, that was my great differentiation. It was actually on it's not artifact, looking at what this actually is. And we miss it. But I don't really know how successfully we're crossing the bridge. Is it just standard in all science and practice that, we're a bit unstable on the new bridge, or whether we're going to be losing all of this human intelligence because we're going to be using artificial intelligence as opposed to what I call assisted intelligence. I jump up and down screaming, and yes, please give me pushback, that we are not ready. We are not ready for this just to be the computer.
Yeah.
The computer.
A very, very large company in Israel that's into AI tried to do AI for psychiatry. and they had a whole bunch of EEGs, and they fed it through the AI, and it didn't really give them anything that they could use. And they contacted me looking for more data. But the data that I get is not data I can hand out, so they didn't get any data from me. But I did discuss what was going on with them. Basically, is that the EEGs that you have in a hospital are medical EEGs for epilepsy and encephalopathies, occasionally brain surgery candidates and things. But you don't have EEGs on autistics and depressives and OCD and ADD. The richness of the full set of colors that you can paint with in psychiatry is not there. You've got black and white, and you can't really get the prism that breaks out all of psychiatry from the data that they've got. And it's a problem. Now, I have the old skin version of intelligence, and I looked at over 500,000 data points, and kind of think I have some idea of what I'm looking at. I think it's going to take them at least that amount. And it's going to have to be a broad spectrum of input, not just the classical medical. Stanford ran into the same problem. Emmett Aitken, their program director, ended up with private funding and split off from Stanford with the project. But they had 37,000 EEGs that were digitized already, and they thought they were going to have a leg up. But it was Stanford, got all medical, and it's great if you're trying to figure out epilepsy, but if you're trying to figure out psychiatry, you don't have the data set for it. And he also came to me looking for data. I introduced him to a couple of my clients who had large data sets that had gone through IRBs to get access to. So I think they've worked out some access to some data, but it's not, it's going to take hundreds of thousands.
Lisa, what hardware do you use? Is it all I-Medisync? Do you have a smattering of here? I haven't talked to Dave Berkus in a long time. I'm trying to see if it's, when it first came out, this white helmet's going to revolutionize things, and then I hear that kids have a problem wearing it because it's too heavy and the thing startles.
It's too heavy. I love some of the functionality. So we have Medisync. We have several Nexus, whether they're 32Fs or.
Do you need another one?
A Q32.
You need a 19 channel?
What's that?
Lightly used.
I bought one from your sister, actually. But I might, so we'll touch base on that. So,
all right.
Mostly Nexus for recording in general, but
and then for people that don't know, that was through it was Nexus, was Steve, and now it's Mind Media. Erwin Hartsuker. Do you still keep in contact with Erwin? I haven't talked to him.
Yeah, we've worked with them because we had a software glitch this summer, fall. So yeah, they're still very much, pumping along.
What's your it's hard to play favorites, and it's also, you're trying to be real. Everything has its pluses and minuses. Mm-hmm. Is your go-to the Nexus 19 channel?
It absolutely is, because the quality of the quality of the connection and the impedance and all that is so clean, done right. Yeah. The helmet I bought because I wanted to start doing this baseline qEEG, and I thought I would go to teams and do it at practices, and that's what it's been wonderful for, because you don't need an internet and you can just hook it up to your laptop and you're good. And for the most part, it can be a pretty good, clean recording. It's just, I don't know. I feel like I like the Nexus for when
it's 1.0, and look, whatever we use, as long as people, it gets adopted, and people, cool helmet, and it needs to be lighter. It needs to not startle people.
Well, they have a new one.
They have a lighter one called the I-Sync We instead of the Wave, and it's a lighter one is slightly smaller, intended for kids.
I got to get brushed up, Jay. We got to get Mr. Berkus on here, or all the new people they've hired from the neurofeedback services in the States here. Who should we bring on,
Yeah,
Jay?
they're just starting into the neurofeedback application actually as well. The photobiomodulation they've been implementing and have done good research with that. They're published in it, and so the benefits for mild cognitive impairment, maintenance of function, basically has been validated with a large study. The gigantic data set that they had, they split in two. They did the study on one part of it, established their findings, their predictive findings, and then tested it on the other half. So they did validation on their data as well. So really high level science, and I always appreciate the people that are going to try and sell you something doing high level science to show that it works before they hit the market.
Well, who has the right database to compare to?
Oh, Lord.
Well, for photobiomodulation, that's a treatment. That's not.
I'm just saying in general, because we're still running into that silo thing that mine's better than
Swingle clinical database, of course.
There you go.
Yeah. I have to suggest that a database that does not differentiate male and female is not up to the current state of the science, and that sets most databases aside. The Russian Swiss database added more people across time, and they've split male and female, so they have a sex specific database as well. If you're not using ICA data cleaning, you're probably not at the state of the art. And I know that there's some people that squeal about it as it bastardizes the EEG and all of that. But yeah, if that were in fact the case, you'd see it complained about in journals, not in marketplace. If it's screamed in the marketplace, it's a marketing deal. If it's science, look to the journals. Where's the complaint in the journal? Richard Davidson's lab did a phase reset a study and a shift phase reset, and they took out the eye movement with ICA, and that was supposed to randomize phase, and there would be no phase reset data ever published if ICA had been done. Well, there's a publication. It's in a professional journal. If you really have that complaint, where was your letter to the editor complaining that somehow that was a bad piece of research? If you scream in the marketplace, you're a vendor.
I just want to know who's going to control the N. We need more research. We need more numbers. Is it I-Medisync? Somebody's got to have, here's the studies. Okay.
So the studies are being done. I-Sync has ongoing studies with Harvard, Oxford, Montreal Neurological Institute, which has changed their name. They've got a new name, the Trust, or some same damn thing. But the Montreal Neurological was historically there, Peniston and all that. So. And they've worked in Korea with the national medical system over there before they came over here. So they're doing publishable and published neuroscience, and their database was published in Frontiers of Neuroscience. So exactly how it was created, and the N and criteria for inclusion, exclusion, all of that.
I'm going to get an update from Dave Berkus. I'm going to get him back on the show. Lisa Cramer, the pride of Highland Avenue in Lombard, Illinois. How do we send more people your way? And then talk to me about Colorado. You got different business names. That's Illinois. You have Lombard. What's going on in Colorado? What's the URL? Where do we send people?
So it's mindbodyneurotherapy.com or mindbodyneuro.com. We'll get you to Illinois. And the Colorado website is MBN Colorado. What's that?
Mention NeuroNoodle podcast and you will be charged 20% more.
I'm on it, Pete. I'm on it.
Oh no, you're gonna be buying some equipment. I got to go to the storage locker. Jay Gunkelman, Dr. Marie Swingle, Lisa Cramer. Hey, thanks for coming on the NeuroNoodle Neurofeedback
Thanks
podcast.
so much.
Hey,
Thanks to everybody.
Praise
Bye-bye.
out to California. Get them garden hoses going.
Yeah. Best of luck to everybody. Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye. The NeuroNoodle podcast is supported by listeners and businesses just like you.